welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
Hello, folks, and welcome back to the CPG Guys podcast, where we explore the omni-channel digital journey of brands and retailers. I'm, of course, your co-host, Sri, and I'm joined by my dear friend and co-founder of the CPG Guys podcast. His name is synonymous with consumer loyalty and data-driven insights. I'm talking about PVSP himself, the Dodgers lover living in the Northeast land. Welcome, Mr. Bond. How are you today?
Well, I was just reading how Mookie Betts has put on 10 pounds so that he can hit more home runs. We'll see if that plays out. But short of that, Sri, I'm eagerly anticipating a very big event. As we record this over the weekend, my daughter will be celebrating her 4th birthday, and you know that Zara has got a huge event planned for Nadia. And the theme is unicorns, so it's all about the unicorn. So my life is about unicorns and making unicorns happen. So that's what I'm doing today, Sri.
At the time of this recording, happy birthday to Nadia. It'll be a belated happy birthday when this episode is out, but I know you'll be in a bubble and you're untouchable tomorrow. So I want to wish her the best, wish you the best as you all celebrate. What a great family moment for all of you. Thank you, Peter. And before we get to our guest today, which I can't wait to get into because we're going to talk about my favorite sport, golf, which I don't play, by the way. So I want to remind our audience to visit cpgguys.com on a web browser. You can find links to our podcast, all the major podcasts, which, of course, links to all the major podcast platforms we are on. And if you're not already doing so, please do follow us on LinkedIn, where we publish new comments each and every day of the week. That includes Saturday and Sundays, and every now and then you're going to see us do a LinkedIn Live even on weekends on Saturdays. Subscribe to other podcasts in our collective, including the FMCG Guys, CPG Scoop, newest edition CPG Guys Fast Forward, starting our very own partner in this journey, Brian Gildenberg. We're proud sponsors on Next Stop, formerly known as the Network of Executive Women, whose mission is to advance all women in business and to promote gender equality in the workplace. We have 50 sponsorships to give out this year. Please do reach out to us. If you're not a member already and your organization does not sponsor Next Up, contact@cpgguys.com. Again, that email address is contact@cpgguys.com. The digital liner notes of this episode, of course, will contain hyperlinks to our site, collective podcast sites, our LinkedIn page, our landing page on Next Up site, and of course to our main event, the guest today. So let's hop right in. In November last year, we welcomed today's guests to the podcast. We did part 1. The episode was well received, and we decided to have him back to continue this conversation. This is a conversation and a journey that doesn't have an ending. So the day we reach the ending, we will all retire, we promise you. They're part of a group of former PepsiCo executives known as the Band of Sisters, one that I have followed, admired in the industry, where I got a lot of learnings from, and at some point I have worked for. So I'm proud to have them on the show. They don't know that I worked for them because I was way down in the organization, somewhere rounding error, probably at the time they were the marketing captains of the world.
Sri, you were in the basement typing on a keyboard eating Cheetos, I believe.
There you go. I'm not sure whether it was Cheetos or something else, but definitely in the basement typing on the keyboard, pulling data. And that's where Peter and I actually crossed paths with them 20 years ago, in that basement, and then the famous building and purchase 3-3. They also have recently released the bestseller, You Should Smile More. And what a powerful word, You Should Smile More, which we're going to get into more of. How to dismantle gender bias in the workplace. We will continue our discussion on female empowerment, leadership, gender equality, and the importance of supporting this cause, which we explored in our last episode with them. Join us in welcoming back to the show, Cie Nicholson, investor, advisor to a number of startups, a speaker, and founding member of the Band of Sisters. After 11 years at PepsiCo in marketing positions, including CMO, PepsiCo North America, and after PepsiCo as EVP and CMO of Equinox, SVP and CMO of SoftCard, which is a fintech startup that was acquired by Google. If you follow Cie on Instagram like we do, you can experience our ongoing tribute to alma mater, the University of Illinois, with pictures of her performing handstands in numerous notable locations around the world. She actually presently serves as public board director for Selective Insurance and also served as a private board member for Heartland Food Group and the ANA, which is, of course, the Association of National Advertisers. Also, Lori Tabor Marcus, a group corporate board director, executive coach, founding member of the Band of Sisters as well. After spending 24 years at PepsiCo in multiple roles, including Senior VP, Marketing Activation. After PepsiCo, she served as SVP CMO of the Children's Place Retail Stores, EVP Chief Global Brand and Product Officer at Keurig Green Mountain Coffee, which I drink every single day, and interim global CMO of none other than Peloton Interactive. Lori is a board director of public and private companies, both inclusive. Lori and Cie, I am thrilled to have you on the show. Can't wait to get started. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here. I'll be back.
All right. Lori and Cie, before we start the questions we prepared for you, could you take a minute each and remind us about the actual mission of Band of Sisters?
I'm happy to jump in on that. So really, very simply, we are about building culture and dismantling gender bias in the workplace, just like our book suggests. And there's a lot of different ways that you can dismantle gender bias in the workplace. There's a lot of different ways that you can build culture. The particular approach and angle that we take is by focusing on the seemingly little things, the little things that happen, day by day, little by little, that seem not to be a big deal, but over time they build up and up and up, and it's like sort of one brick in the wall. And over time you have a wall, or the other analogy would be sort of bricks on your shoulder. So these little things happen day in and day out. We're not talking about, God forbid, the Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein kind of Me Too moments. We're talking about these little things, these little insidious things that happen. And over time, what happens is they just serve to just exhaust women, or worse yet, to marginalize them. So that's the particular kind of angle and approach that we take, is dismantling gender bias by focusing on the little things, because we believe the little things are the big things.
Little things matter a lot.
And just a couple examples just to demonstrate, would be the women being asked, hey, will you take the notes? Or someone saying, hey, have you met the new girl in accounting, and calling a woman a girl, or just your point is talked over in a meeting and someone restates what you're saying. So each one of them seems somewhat small that you might not want to stop the meeting to call out or make a big deal of it. So you just brush over it. So then that's why no one talks about them. And if women are very aware of them. Sometimes men are not aware of them. And here we are 30 years later with the same stuff happening. So it's these micro moments that we're going after, but luckily how to solve micro moments is with micro actions. So they're not hard to solve if you're aware of them.
Thank you for that, Lori and Cie. We'll include links to your LinkedIn profile, the Band of Sisters LinkedIn page, and your website in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode, along with a link to your book, which is, of course, available for sale on Amazon.com. So, I mentioned book. Let's jump right in. You've structured the book into a series of 31 examples, 31, of where collectively you experience gender bias yourselves in the workplace. You try to help 3 different archetypes in dealing with these situations. Can you define for us what are these 3 archetypes and their importance to addressing the underlying issues within these archetypes?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Lori, you can jump in. So one thing about our book is we have 31. There's a lot more than 31. We limited to 31, and these were also validated not only with women in our generation, but with younger women. We went out and did hundreds of interviews with younger women, and anything we talk about, anything that's in the book, is still happening, sadly, today. But we did not want this to come across as another thing for women to solve. There's already enough on our plate, and it's impossible for women to solve this by themselves. We certainly give a lot of examples in the book, because there's 6 of us that wrote it. We have different careers. We have different ways of approaching stuff. It's not one size fits all. But we definitely give how might you handle a situation. But beyond help for the woman, also there's the boss or the leader, and this could be any gender, and you want to have a more inclusive team. Therefore, you want to be able to make sure you don't have gender bias. So there's a big reason why leaders would want to get involved and be more aware of this. And then the biggest group out there is witnesses. You are in the room when you hear the stuff happening or see the stuff happening, and you want to be an ally. And what do you do so you're just not kind of complicit seeing things happening? What can you do to kind of help the situation? So it's for the women, it's for witnesses / allies that want to help, and it's for leaders that want to have a better team. Those are the 3 groups that we speak to when we give examples and solutions. One thing about the book is we don't just talk about the problems. We give a very concrete, solutions on how to attack these problems.
Yeah, that's well said. And the only thing I would add to that is it's kind of the difference between like consumer segmentation and occasion segmentation. For any given person in any given sort of meeting or situation, you may be any one of those things. So there are times when I experience something as someone is saying it to me. There are other times where I am a bystander in the room and I have a choice. There's no such thing as being neutral. You either step forward and you become an ally or you are complicit. And then there are times where, as someone who serves on corporate boards, I am essentially the boss. But you're not always one thing. So I think when people read the book or listen to us talk, I hope they think about themselves being in different situations and playing different roles.
Thank you for that, both of you. So now that we've reestablished the premise, let's revisit some of the situations that you so eloquently articulate and the different approaches to how the archetype and the person can respond to it. So one of the examples you describe is the father of the year syndrome. Why are working moms criticized and dads lauded for their behaviors when it comes to child rearing? It's amazing.
It's kind of incredible that this still exists. I had someone challenge me yesterday in a really productive way. I was in preparation for a panel discussion for a National Women's Day, and he said, this stuff doesn't really still go on, does it? And I think we all want to believe that this doesn't still happen, but it does, and we'll cover that a couple of different times. But yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, just to sort of set the scene for everyone. So think about this, a dad has to leave early every Wednesday because he's coaching his daughter's soccer team. So he has to leave at 3:00 every Wednesday. And everyone's like, oh, he's such a good dad. And then, a mom has to come in 30 minutes late on Thursday morning because she had to take her daughter to the dentist or the doctor or whatever. And it's just not really sure how committed Lori is, and just not really sure where her priorities are. So it's kind of crazy that it still exists. I'll let Cie comment on it. But one thing that I'll say is I think this chapter is a really good example of it's not like women be good, men be bad. Women do this as well. We do the same thing. We ooh and ah when a man tells us that he has to leave early. And, in our book, we literally show this Father of the Year trophy. So this is one of those things where I think we all have to sort of check our behavior and reaction a little bit because we're so used to sort of the 1950s sort of Mad Men thing where the men went off to work with their briefcase and, you sort of have the June Cleaver at home with a dress making dinner. And so it's just amazing that 50, 60 years later, we're still sort of catching up with where we are today.
I do think that the bar on this for men is kind of so low that just a small little effort gets this huge praise. And I do think that women actually are more complicit in this. When you hear people saying, oh my God, did you hear that Bob is coaching the softball team? It's in my experience, it's more women that are really giving such, fanfare on that versus other men. So I think that women, have to be aware of the tone that they're setting with that. I think one thing that men, I think, do a better job is when they can't make a meeting or something like that, they'll just kind of state that time's not good for me tomorrow at 3:00. And can someone take notes for me or I'll catch back up? I think the women are going to be more I got to go pick up my daughter. I got to do this. I apologize, over apologize. And then they're like, hey, Lori, can you take notes for me? Then they get home and they have dinner. Then they call Lori and, hey, did you have the notes? I'm so sorry. And they just make this big production out of it versus hey, that time's not, they probably offer too much information and apologize too much. And I think that if they did less of both of those, it wouldn't even stick out as much. So I think in some cases, I think women are not helping their cause by being overly apologetic.
I got to tell you, Steve, that example that you just gave of the meeting one is hitting home to me today. I have a standard weekly kind of getting together in my day job of my leadership team, all those who report to me, where we check in on the numbers, things of that nature. And one of the women actually said to me today, hey, I'm taking Monday off because something going on with that person's son, but I won't miss your leadership team meeting. And I said, why? Why do you need to show up at the leadership team meeting? And then I got the explanation. It's important. There's going to be everybody else, direct reports. And I'm like, if I see you at the leadership meeting, I'm actually going to be livid. A day off is a day off. You made a choice. I'm going to invest it with the child or family, whatever the case might be. However you've chosen to invest it, respect it and enjoy the entire day. Don't shortchange whoever it is with that you've chosen to spend some time with for 2 hours and show up. And I hope that's what happens. Of course, at the time of this recording, we'll know. The second thing that kind of hit home a little bit is Father of the Year. I think even that, you're 100% right, because my daughters are musicians, fully launched singer-songwriters, both of them, well on their journey of being on stage all the time. It's the moms and women who tend to tell me more, wow, what a great father you are. I don't see them saying that to my wife, Kavita, what a great mother you are. And the way that the context in which they say that to me is you show up for the events, you're supportive, both on the financial side. It was necessary until a certain point, until their careers started blossoming. And for showing up at the events, and every Saturday I do a business meeting with my daughters, checking in on helping them check in on their finances and what's next for them, things of that nature. And people actually tell me I'm Father of the Year for that. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm just trying to do what every parent should probably do, which is show up at moments that matter and do the things they ask me back for. Like, it's just life. There's nothing like celebratory about life. Now, the reason I will celebrate is one of them gets a Grammy Award. I think that's celebratory worthy, but that too is about them. It's not about me being Father of the Year, to be very clear. But those two hit home pretty hard, those two examples. And I'm not sure till y'all literally called them out as examples, I tracked fully to how serious this is. So on that account, let's go to the administrative side of the equation here. Administrative chores. You refer to an example. Hey, can you take notes? How do administrative chores often fall victim to gender bias? How does it shape itself?
Yeah, I think this is a really good example. I should say a premise in our book is that most of the examples that we're giving are unconscious bias. Like, I don't think most men or most people in general are waking up in the morning saying, I think I'm going to hold women's progress back by asking, Cie to take the notes. I really do not think it's intentional. So we give, I think in the book, in the speaking that we do, we give a lot of grace and we assume things are unconscious. So I'll just say that. This is a perfect example of this. So I think I've been the person, if any of my college friends are listening, they'll laugh because, for decades now, I've been the one taking notes because I have really nice handwriting and I'm very organized. Well, guess what? Notes in the workplace aren't really written anymore. They're usually, typed on a keyboard. So I think this is a good example of just, it started with years ago, most of the administrative assistants were women. That's how women got into the workplace, was through administrative assistants. So I'm sure that's why it exists the way it is. But think about, you're on a call, Peter's running late, and you're like, hey, Lori, can you ping Peter? Why don't we say like, hey, Roger, can you ping Peter? We don't even think about it. We just tend to ask the women. And again, on the pinging, like, we all have a cell phone sitting right next to our computer. Any one of us could, quote unquote, ping Peter. So it's sometimes like that where women are asked to take the notes. I mean, sometimes it's little sort of the work that doesn't get rewarded or the non-promotable work, like asking women like, oh, it's Secretary's Day or Admin Assistant Day. Like, oh, can you get a gift or can you go and pick up, brownies before work or whatever? We don't even think about it, asking women to, order flowers for Admin's Day or, plan baby showers or bridal showers. And sometimes it's women offering to do it because they're kind of used to doing it in their life. So I think it happens in these very sort of unplanned, insidious ways. And I think it's a really good example of, again, it's not intentional. And it's sort of a good example, like, really for the whole book around, okay, what do you do? I mean, there's no one right answer to do that. But one of the, I'll give you one example. So we interviewed, as Cie said, hundreds of women, mostly younger women for this book. And one woman, she had such a good answer. She's like a 42-year-old up and coming director, senior director type. And I asked her about this and she said, oh, I get asked that all the time. I said, what do you say? And she says, she had such a perfect answer. She said, I really want to be fully present in this meeting and I really want to pay attention. But if I'm just thinking about taking the notes for everybody else, I won't be able to do that. I won't be able to fully participate. So I have a suggestion. Why don't we invite Roger, Janie, Bill, doesn't matter, man or woman, some junior person who wasn't going to be in the meeting. Why don't we invite them to be in the meeting, and their role will be to take notes. It'll be a good learning experience for them, and then I'll be able to fully participate.
Yeah.
How do you argue with that? Like, it was such a clear, concise, sort of benefit-based answer. And so that was something I really liked when we were talking to people. Others, had suggestions around. They'll say, yeah, I'm happy to project manage this meeting or take the notes in this meeting. Let's just kind of get organized around how we divide that up. So I'll take it this time. Peter, you'll take the meeting on Friday. Shree, you'll take the one on Monday. Cie, you got next Thursday. And you just sort of divide up the work. And then one final thing I'll say on this is, there's kind of a flip side point of view just on this one particular, which is, he or she who takes the notes gets to decide what was said in the meeting. And so what sometimes people will do is they'll say, Lori, will you take the notes? And they'll say, yeah, I'm happy to take the notes. Let's divide up the other responsibilities. So I'll take the notes. Peter, can you be responsible for sending the calendar invite for the next meeting? Shree, can you be in charge of ordering the food for the next meeting? And then Cie, will you take point on briefing the people that weren't here? So all of a sudden, instead of you being the only one that gets a task, if this is a task you actually like, just remember to sort of divide up the other tasks among, all genders in the room.
I would just add, I agree that there can be upside is have controlling the pen, and you can certainly, but I think more often than not, it's probably, you might be seen as more administrative. You're sitting there after the meeting trying to figure out how to send out the notes so you're not walking out with people and doing the post-mortem. And it's just, there's probably more downside, than the upside. I think women also, sometimes when someone says, hey, who wants to take notes today? And it could be, set up the Zoom meeting. Any task. We're using notes as one example. I think when there's silence, women are more likely to fill that void and be like, oh, well, I will. And in some cases, women have to be comfortable in that silence and not necessarily volunteer. And then the last thing I guess I'd say in this is one of our band sisters, Angelique, has this great, I think it was Angelique who had the story about someone that was in a meeting with her boss and another peer of hers, and they were going to work up some notes on some client, whatever. And so the woman immediately approached the whiteboard to take notes, as she always does. And these are two very senior people. And the boss, after having read our book, said, you know what, why is it always, Lori that's approaching the board and never Peter? And so he said, yeah, you know what, well, today, Peter, why don't you take the notes? And all of a sudden, so then Peter took the notes and Lori sat down. And afterwards, the woman was so impressed by this, wrote the boss a note and said, I think you're such a great boss. I love working for you, but I cannot believe how much impact by you doing that small gesture, how it made me feel seen, made me feel great. And just, he got such accolades, and all he did was saying, hey, Peter, you take the notes this time. And so that's an example of a micro action, but it has an outsized impact on the person of you can seem like heroic, and all you've just done is saying, Peter, you take the notes. So like I said, these are micro actions. This is not like, hey, in $1 billion in 4 years, we'll have a solution on these infrastructure projects. This is literally like, I'm aware of it. Women always take the notes, or more often than notes have all the office housework. They're the ones that are either going to volunteer, be voluntold, or whatever you want to say. Let me just try to insert myself, rotate it, and you can have such huge impact.
All right, let's throw some more fuel on the flame, shall we? Should women avoid saying the word sorry at work? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
I think that they should avoid saying it as much as they do. I think that one thing that's interesting is we look at academic research besides our own research. The research says, if you ask people who apologizes more, everyone knows that women do. But if you ask then guys, if they think they apologize, men think they apologize at the same level that women do when they think they've committed an offense. It's just what their level of what an offense is. But I think that with women, that they apologize, I think, for many things all over the place, stuff that's not even their fault. There's a lot of just or couching, whatever, and I think it seems very diminishing. And there's some really easy solves. Lori has a whole bunch of lists. We all have a list of these, but opposed to saying, sorry, I didn't understand that, be like, can you please, explain that again? Thanks for pointing that out versus I'm sorry, I didn't understand that, or thanks for your patience versus I'm sorry, I'm late, or I'm responding to your email of, Tuesday the 5th versus sorry I didn't get back to you early. I mean, just small wording gives you more of your power and doesn't seem as diminishing. So I think that women here do apologize too much. And I think that these, again, very easy solves of trying to, in some language. And then, this whole idea of Dawn Hudson would say that she would, when she was CEO or the president of PepsiCo North America, she said guys would come in. There's problems every day in business. That's what we're here for. And she said that the men would more likely come in with a problem and say, here's a solution to do it. Women would come in and apologize and then get to the solution and whatever. And so she said it was just very notable that guys wouldn't apologize. They just say, here's how we're going to, attack this. So, I mean, there are certainly times that it makes sense that if you made a faux pas, there are times to apologize, but apologize when it's really a mistake and not just apologizing for stuff that you don't control.
Yeah, I'm a chronic apologist. I feel like I've been apologizing my whole life. And I don't know if it's because when I was younger, I was sort of this like snarky, I'll say girl, snarky girl from New Jersey. And so I've always been trying to sort of like tone it down a little bit. And so I'm a total apologist. And so to this day, I did it this morning. I sat down to write an email. And the advice that somebody gave us when we were doing the research, she said, sort of channel your inner Chuck. So when you sit down to write an email, like think about like how Chuck would say it. And Chuck wouldn't say, I'm just checking in, right? But I literally, and there are software programs that do this, which go and they can count the number of sort of like minimizing words that you use, like sorry, just is a big one. And it's just interesting. I now find that I'll sit down, I'll catch myself, take out the just word and just write. And then before I send it, I'll take a look at it because I feel like there's so many times where people are trying to minimize women's power consciously or unconsciously. So the last thing that we need to be doing is giving up our power by throwing in that minimizing language. So channel your inner Chuck is my advice for the podcast.
Very fair. Let me remind our audience that we are speaking with Lori, Tauber, Marcus, and Cie Nicholson from the Band of Sisters, authors of the book, You Should Smile More. So back to corporate coffee station and water cooler talks. We've all heard of the word, the meeting before the meeting. And I hear it to the day. Why is the meeting before the meeting so important? I'm chuckling as I say it because I hear it all the time. So why is the meeting before the meeting so important to stay in the loop? And what does that even mean?
So I'll start. I think, in general, in cultures, corporate cultures, I would say two things. One is, culture is typically, it's not what's written down. It's not what's laminated on your vision, mission, value statement. I mean, culture is largely about how decisions get made. And also it's about sort of the unsaid way that things happen in a company. And usually they're not, good or bad. They just are. So I think to that point, part of what's really important to understand is, again, how things happen. And very rarely is it just like there's a pre-read and then there's a meeting and we talk about it in the meeting and decisions are made in the meeting. It's just not how companies work. And so I think oftentimes many people can be naive about this, but women, because they've been historically underrepresented in the most senior places, they're just not aware of how important it's the whole ecosystem of how a company works. So there's kind of a meeting before the meeting. There's a meeting before that. There's pre-wiring people. There's bringing people on board. And as I'm saying this, I don't mean it to be bureaucratic. It's just often a very effective way in large and complex organizations to not walk into a room and just think that that's where, it's not a Broadway show. That's not where, you're not on stage. So I think, we always talk about, when we're talking about dismantling gender bias, we always think about how effectively to use the time before a meeting, what you can do in a meeting. And a meeting can be in person, it can be on Zoom, it can be on the phone. And then also the meeting after the meeting. Very rarely does something happen and that's it. It's tied up in a bow and we move forward. So typically there's some, pre-wiring that happens beforehand, bringing others on board. There's what happens in the meeting. And then typically there's some things that happen after a meeting. And I think it's really important for everybody as you're mentoring people to not just mentor and coach them in their skill area in accounting or marketing or supply chain, but also to mentor and coach people in terms of the rhythm of the organization.
And the other thing I would add on that is that a lot of times these things happen in very informal settings. It could be on the way to the lunchroom. It could be sitting next door on a plane, on the basketball court, on the golf course, or whatever. So in some cases, if you're not involved in some of these side conversations, that you could kind of be at a disadvantage because, you're not in the men's locker room when they're talking about whatever. So I think in some cases, these informal networks or whatever, that's where women are not usually represented because we're not in all of those situations, either by number or just by, you're not out drinking sometimes with the guys at night. And sometimes that's where this stuff happens.
I'm so excited. I'm at this corporate offsite. We've got a little golf round going. We're there. And it's like, oh man, Lori's in our foursome. Now we're going to have to go to the women's tee. So how do you handle this situation where you sense you may not be welcome, like the golf foursome? What do you do about breaking that apart and stopping that from occurring?
That was actually in the book we write about. That was actually my story. So I'm a very average golfer. I don't do it all that often. And I remember I was at Pepsi and we were going out to the West Coast and we were going to, part of the meeting was going to be a golf outing with our bottlers, our distributors. And they decided those 3 bottlers with 1 corporate person. And I was fairly new director at this point. My name spelled CIE. It's hard to maybe know the gender. And so it was at Pebble Beach, which obviously a good golf course. I probably shouldn't be on the golf course at that point. I think I have rental clubs. I mean, there's a lot of things going against me. But I'm like, I'm going to do this because I want to build all these informal relationships and be a good sport and do all that. So anyways, I go walking up, and I'm nervous because, again, like I said, I don't want to do damage to this golf course. I walk up, and you can just see the 3 guys who all knew each other, were excited. This is an annual event for them. Just their shoulders dropped. They were absolutely irritated. They were playing with a girl, quote unquote, a girl. And so it just was such an uncomfortable feeling, and maybe my nervousness went up 4-fold. We get to the first tee. They're all up at the tee box laughing and Josh and whatever. I'm just kind of sitting there. We then drive way up to the women's tees. In this particular, there was a big difference. And at that point, now I'm really nervous because I'm the only one at the tee box. They're all back there saying nothing. It was so nerve-wracking. It ended up being fine because the women's tees were so far ahead that when I would hit the ball, that if I could just keep it in the fairway, I became a big advantage. And by hole 3, they were thrilled. They had a girl on the team. And so it worked out well. I had built great relationships. I totally was worth doing it. But it didn't have to start off so uncomfortable and get comfortable. It could have just been comfortable from the get-go. If I would have felt like, they're shaking my hand, be like, oh, hey, see, great to meet you, versus me having to feel uncomfortable and go through that. And it's something that, I think about it, this is 20 years later, and I think of how I felt. And it was really, just so unnecessary to make, to feel included. But, like I said, it ended up being fine. I'd have to say most of the situations that I think many of us have been in, whether it's golf or pheasant shooting or going to different bars or whatever, I think in the end, most of us would say that, the upside of building those relationships was worth the discomfort that went along with it. Hopefully people today are more sensitized and be more welcoming, or events that are, more inclusive from the get-go. But yeah, really made me feel of how does it feel not to be included. It left a mark.
And think about how, as a manager or whoever it is who's planning these events, how little effort it takes just to think about planning something that's a little bit more inclusive. So I think about, some of the most fun things that I did when I was a leader. We did co-ed cooking classes, we did bowling, we did scavenger hunts. When I was in food service and hospitality, we did these food tours and trend tours, and we laughed and we had fun and we bonded. I think sometimes some of these are just sort of their vestiges of the past, and they're just lazy. So when salespeople say oh, we need to do golf because customers like to golf, and it's customers would never, they have no other ability to golf unless you take them golfing. They wouldn't want to. They're in the food business. They wouldn't want to go on a trend tour. And so I just think it's a little bit mentally lazy. And I think, to Cie's point, as somebody who's invited to these things, like you have to think about it. You're going to sort of, which things are you going to make a fuss about? But I think for leaders, it's such an easy thing to just think about things that are more, I would say, gender inclusive and also ability inclusive. I mean, we've had men, when we've had these conversations, we've had men who aren't athletic talk to us about how they're like, you think it's hard for you as a woman who doesn't play basketball or whatever? They're like, do you know how hard it is to be a white guy that doesn't know how to play golf or, kind of can't do athletic things? So I just think on this one, part of the theme is, can everyone just stop being lazy and think about something that is a little bit more inclusive?
Powerful. Thank you. So I'm going to close it out with a question coming back to the archetypes. How would you encourage the 3 archetype examples you all gave, particularly managers, to make use of the actual book and learn from it?
Particularly managers?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
What would you encourage managers to do with this book to fundamentally change how things operate in their organizations?
Yeah, I also want to go to some of our earlier discussions, which weren't part of the podcast recording, but men often hesitate to say things because they're not sure whether it'll come across the right way. Is it offensive? Am I qualified to say it? So put that in context as well as you coach us to be better allies, men to be better allies. And then especially if you're a manager, can you take your learnings from the book and apply it as is on the day job?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, see if you're okay. I think the most important thing that I would say is this is a journey. So nobody is ever done. It's not like, okay, I got it. Like I learned all 31. I know those. I'm good. Like I'm good to go. I mean, society and life marches on, culture changes, society changes. So hopefully we're all of that mindset where we're continuing to learn and grow. So I think having sort of an open mindset, I am a dynamic person who's going to continue to grow as society grows, whether you're any gender. I think that is sort of like base case. That's kind of minimum viable product. So we've had people say like, no, I'm an ally. I get it. I'm fine. I literally had this on a call with somebody this morning. And it was a man who's a chief marketing officer kind of level. And he said, I first thought, he goes, when I picked up your book, he's like, I'm one of the good guys. I'm an ally. So he's like, I was going to read it because I know you. But he said, I didn't think I was going to learn anything. And then he said, like 10 pages, 100 pages, 200 pages in, he said, I couldn't believe how much I was highlighting and learning, because even people that are really well motivated, like I said earlier, so much of this is unconscious. So I think if we all take the attitude of, again, definition of unconscious bias, you're not doing it with any malintent. So if you think about that quick rotation of, oh, I want to learn. I didn't realize that this was a thing. So thank you for educating me. What can I say or do to make things better? And if you just realize that that's a cycle you're going to go through, not once a week, not once a day, but probably in every minute of every day. And our book focuses on gender bias, but I think, part of my learning going through this is, oh gosh, there's things that I say and do, I am sure every day, that probably make a person of color maybe feel less than like fabulous. Like I'm saying something that I didn't realize it's a stereotype that I didn't even know. And so I think we all have to take that attitude of we're learning and growing, open your eyes, know you're a person that is always developing, and then continue to be open to feedback to learn and grow.
And I guess my advice would be, in some cases, like if, after reading it, you're aware of these situations, it's now just kind of pay attention and do simple things like bosses often get to the meeting last, and then the meeting starts when the boss gets there. Get to the meeting a couple minutes earlier. What is the conversation that's happening? Is it two guys that are talking about the Phillies and no one else is paying attention and they're kind of dominating it? And then you can kind of redirect the conversation so it's more inclusive. Listen, are people over talking? Does Lori come up with an idea? No one really grabs it. And then Peter later restates it. And then all of a sudden that idea goes from there. You can also be like, hey, that's interesting. Yeah, wait, Lori, you were saying it, and redirect it back to Lori to kind of help her get credit. Is there office housework that's distributed? And does it always go to the women? Are they setting up Zoom meetings and finding the IT support or set up the next meeting or getting the flowers? Again, redirect it. And so I think if they just sit back and pay a little bit of attention, knowing that if you know that some of these biases are the women are going to be more likely to volunteer for the United Way campaign and therefore they're not going to be on the M&A task force, help try to kind of notice some of these things and kind of redirect it. You could be in one meeting and do 4 things this afternoon.
Wow. Well said. Well said. Can't thank you all enough for continuing to be coaches for the industry, but also for Peter and me by coming back on the show. And I'm sure this conversation will come back another time here in the near future. Let me remind our audience that you can find all of our content on a web browser at cpgguys.com. And if you think you or your company has some thought leadership to contribute to our community here on the CPG Guys, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Again, that's contact@cpgguys.com. And maybe you can join us on the podcast, just like today's discussion. Don't forget to drop us a rating at cpgguys.com on the top right navigation bar on our website. We want to sincerely thank our 20K plus followers because you have shaped the show. You have decided topics to speak, who comes on and what, and where we should be headed in the future as well. Thank you for listening to us talk 7 days a week. Cie and Lori, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. A second time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think Peter shared with y'all that when you hit the magic mark of 5 episodes, there's a special SNL type jacket waiting for y'all that only 2 people have earned on the podcast today.
They've already got T-shirts and water bottles, but you get the varsity jacket after 5 episodes.
All right. Sign us up.
Aspirational goals. But thank you both. Sri, this is a great episode. I'm going to try and be very brief in the summary and just say, one, you have to be present. You have to be conscious of what's going on around you. As a leader myself, I bought, and I told this to both Lori and Cie, I bought multiple copies of the book. I gave it to all of my direct reports. I gave it to my head of HR. And I was joking the other day that I came home and there was a box with 4 more copies and I don't remember ordering it. And my wife said, "Oh, I'm giving that out to my friends. I loved it so much." So we got to spread the word, Sri. We got to be advocates. It's not just about being a witness when it happens. We have to help set in motion the conditions so that less of this bias occurs on a day-to-day basis. But this was just great. And Sri, thanks for, as always, joining me on this journey that we have exploring what we're exploring.
Thank you, folks. That's the wrap of this episode. If you didn't already, please do go back and listen to episode number 1. The easiest way for you to do that, go to cpgguys.com. On the top right search bar, when you search for episodes, you can simply type either Cie or Lori's name, Lori or CIE or Band of Sisters, and you'll find the episode easily. That's a wrap here. See you soon on another episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys, LLC, or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys, LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys, LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys, LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.